Congress is back in session in Washington, D.C. Oh, boy, ain't that exciting. And now we, I believe, are at 19 days since the articles of impeachment were drawn up and passed by the House of Representatives against President Donald J. Trump, a matter that was of great urgency, a matter that had to be addressed in a rapid amount of time, and then everybody broke 19 days so they could go home for Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever else they were celebrating. And now they're back. And guess where the articles of impeachment are? Still on Nancy Pelosi's desk. So what does this mean for this process? And the longer it remains there, does it not just highlight that this is nothing more than political gamesmanship in an attempt to either discredit or, in some strange fashion, maybe, just maybe, interfere with the election of 2020? My goodness, when all things seem to be breaking, all hell seems to be breaking loose in Washington, D.C., we turn to only one man, and one man only. He is in the political science department at Tarleton State University. In fact, I think he runs the joint down there, but we'll find that out quickly. He is Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, and he's standing by on the AcuteHearingCenters.com hotline. And Dr. Cogley, welcome back to 700 WLW. How are you on this glorious Tuesday?
I'm good, Ken. Happy New Year. Thanks for the nice introduction and for having me back.
Yes, you do run the show down there, don't you? I think basically you are at the gate. Nobody gets through unless they pass you, and you say you bless and say, yes, you can come in, right? Isn't that the way it works?
Well, I'm honored to serve in the role of department head. We have 3 disciplines here. We have political science, legal studies, and philosophy. Political science is my discipline.
Well, it'd be nice if we had some discipline in Washington, D.C. If this was so damn urgent, why did everybody break for 19 days for Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year, whatever it may be, and they went off on their trips to God knows where outside of this country? Why was it so urgent? Why is it sat on Pelosi's desk, and why is she trying to dictate to Mitch McConnell, the senator from the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, and to Lindsey Graham, who heads the Senate Judiciary Committee? Why is she trying to dictate terms to them?
Well, the claim of urgency was always disingenuous. They were saying Trump is a national security threat. They therefore have to move fast. They don't have time to go to the courts because Trump needs to be removed from office and barred from future office. That was always off the table. We always knew the votes weren't there to actually convict and remove and bar from office. So that sense of urgency was always disingenuous. This is political, but much of the commentary is focused on the presidential election, which is, of course, a factor. But the other factor people are not paying attention to is Nancy Pelosi. She wants Democrats to do well. She wants the moderate Democrats to do well and the Democratic presidential candidates to do well. But her priority is herself. She herself is on the ballot in San Francisco on March 3rd. She has to be a partisan warrior up until March 3rd. California has the top 2 system. The top 2 are the only 2 that will appear on the November ballot. She's never faced a fellow Democrat as her opponent on the November ballot. And there's Bernie Sanders supporting Democratic Socialists that would just love to be her opponent in November. She needs to consolidate Democratic support now, be a partisan warrior up through March 3rd. If she gets a Republican opponent in November come March 3rd, we'll see her behavior go back to a moderate.
So are you saying, Dr. Cogley, that this is all boiled down to Nancy Pelosi's political future, and that's why this thing hasn't moved forward in 19 days?
If we rewind a year ago, Nancy Pelosi said she wouldn't move on impeachment unless it was bipartisan. The evidence was overwhelming. She sounded very reasonable, very moderate. She was playing the role of Speaker of the House and trying to protect her moderate members and trying to protect the Democratic majority. The problem, though, is she's not from a moderate district. She's from one of the most Democratic partisan districts in the country. Now, Ken, I'm from San Francisco. I love San Francisco. I have family there, and I know them very well. So while this behavior, this partisan warrior behavior where she did the articles of impeachment but not sending it over and trying to dictate the terms in the Senate, it sounds to a lot of people totally irrational and inappropriate. But for a partisan warrior environment like she represents, it's like she's fighting with everything she's got.
Okay, so it's a political ruse. We know that. Your opinion there which in the absence of information, anything can take hold, but it sounds sound that this is what's going on with her. Mitch McConnell has to know that. So why would Mitch McConnell let her play to her political base in San Francisco at the risk of holding the country hostage until after a March primary in San Francisco?
So we have never had an impeachment with a divided Congress. So the impeachment rules in the Senate, and the Senate's entirely empowered to write its own rules. But the last time they wrote rules on this, both parties, the same party controlled both chambers. So in the Senate rules currently, it does say that, you know, when the House specifies its managers, then the Senate will announce a date for the trial and invite those managers to make their case. The Senate is totally empowered to change its rules. These rules were written when the same party controlled both chambers. We've never seen an impeachment where two different parties control the two different chambers. So one way McConnell might play this out is say, fine, you don't want to send it, don't send it. We don't want to do this anyway. The other thing, if they really wanted to play hardball, would be to change their own rules. Say, hey, you passed articles. We don't need your managers. They appear nowhere in the Constitution. And to set a trial date. And the key to this is Chief Justice John Roberts. Constitution says he presides. If he shows up and drops a gavel, that's a trial, right? And has nothing to do with House managers who don't appear in the Constitution. They only appear in Senate rules.
Okay, so the Senate could change its own rules, which means it has to have the simple majority, I would guess. I don't know. Again, we're in uncharted water here. I don't know if Pence could participate, but you need 51 to pass this. So if indeed that's the case, if McConnell is rounding up votes, if his whip has got everybody under control, why couldn't he simply go ahead and do that this week, early part of next week, or whatever? Just say we're having a change of a procedure here when it comes to the impeachment of a president, and it's on the floor for vote. He could simply do that and get 51, and then that's it, right?
Well, I'm sure those discussions are taking place into what he'd like to do if he wants to just, you know, let this thing not be sent over and go on with other business, or if he wants to force this. But yeah, they only got 53, so it's a close margin there for the 51, and I'm sure he's having discussions, and I'm sure that's on the table. Of course, the wild card there is John Roberts, but I imagine if the Senate changed its rules, dropped the House manager from the rules, sent him an invitation for the trial, I believe Roberts would show up.
He would show up. All right, the problem with anything in the Republican Party is holding rank. The House and the Democrats are terrific at holding rank. The Republicans, it's like herding cats sometime, but it's a finite number of cats. It's Murkowski in Alaska, it's Collins in Maine, it's Romney in Utah, who thinks he should have been president, and maybe one or two others, but it's those three. And I understand Romney, he's a bitter man, and I understand Collins because she's being challenged, and to a degree I understand Murkowski, she comes from a very diverse state. But I would guess that whatever McConnell is doing right now to try and herd votes centers around those three people, does it not?
Yeah, I mean, he'd need those votes. But again, they're not Democrats. They're not in the interest of Democrats. But they wouldn't mind maybe frustrating a little bit the process of the trial. We have never seen in the Senate the party of the president break. The Democrats held with Johnson. The Democrats held with Clinton 100%. It's the party prosecuting that breaks. But these members who sometimes differ with Trump in style and approach, and especially publicly in the media, they may want to, have witnesses that maybe Trump doesn't want, or have rules that maybe the Trump administration doesn't want. That's not going to catch on with the voters of their district as really going against the president. It's that ultimate vote of guilty or not guilty that the voters will care about.
It's interesting how this has many facets. Let's say that there is a trial, and let's say that it involves witnesses, and let's say it goes on for 2 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks. You've got some Democrat senators that are out there trying to get Trump's job. They'd have to come back from the campaign trail, which would nuke whatever chances they have in Iowa, maybe as far into New Hampshire. So if you're looking at people like Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker and Amy Klobuchar and people like that, they've got a major stake in this game personally, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know that they want to be held up with this trial. But again, there'd be Biden out there, and he seems to have some of the support of the establishment wing. But the most thing that is really they want to avoid is eventually getting to a vote of not guilty, because we talk about 47 Democratic senators and the need to get 20 to get to 67. That's simple math. That's not good math. No. Joe Manchin in West Virginia cannot vote for this, and Doug Jones in Alabama cannot vote for this. So the fact that we're headed, if we ever get to a trial and a vote from the senators, they won't even have 47, and Trump will look very good coming out of that. All the damage they've done to his poll numbers will evaporate, and Trump will be in a good position for the election.
Now, Dr. Cogley, the senator from Missouri, John Hawley, freshman senator from Missouri, has a piece of legislation that he's pushing. He's got 10 other senators behind him at this hour to simply hold a vote to drop this. In other words, we're just dropping this whole thing. Do you think that's a non-starter simply because it would look like a whitewash, or do you think Hawley has any legs on this thing?
To drop it, that's constitutionally questionable if they can drop it. Certainly McConnell played hardball when it came to the hearings for Merrick Garland, right? So Obama had nominated a new Chief Justice, and McConnell didn't hold a hearing on that or a vote. But the Constitution never uses such language as they need to have a hearing on Chief Justice. But the Constitution does say that the Senate tries impeachment. So to dismiss without a trial. Now, a trial doesn't need to be big or long. You need a gavel dropped, and then you need some decisions made. So a trial could be very short. There's also no reason to take that option away from McConnell and from the Senate at this point. The not guilty vote would be good. But to get a gavel dropped and to say, hey, the prosecutors aren't here, or there's really nothing here, we're going to find not guilty, that would be strong. And I don't see this being dismissed without Roberts showing up for a gavel.
Okay, so to just wrap up this particular portion of what I want to talk to you about, it seems like that this thing will go forward if indeed these articles are dropped on McConnell. If they're not dropped on McConnell, he's just going to go about his business. If they are dropped on McConnell, it sounds like that they may go into some sort of or push for some sort of vote as to how indeed they proceed with the impeachment. It doesn't necessarily have to be, we call witnesses, we call additional witnesses. Maybe the devil is in the negotiations beforehand. I don't know. But you see this as something that will happen if indeed Pelosi takes these things and walks over to McConnell and delivers them. Short of that, McConnell doesn't take this thing up, right?
Well, he has the option to try to change the rules and force this, but I'm not sure he's going to do that. Pelosi is basically, she's being the partisan warrior, but she'll also make the case, if she has to continue being a partisan warrior, that they're working on additional articles of impeachment, that it's premature to send this over. We're really in uncharted territory here, Ken, and the Constitution has some simple sentences around this without all the details worked out. So it's not like a physical science where the forces of gravity are predictable. This is like sports, and you know very well sports. It's a competition. The game has to be played out. Each side has some tools to work with. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really looking to see who is Pelosi's opponent. Once we see it's a Republican, she can drop this partisan warfare stuff and try to help her Democratic members keep control of the House. But if she ends up with a Democratic Socialist opponent, she's going to be a partisan warrior all the way through.
Interesting. Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, Tarleton State University. One final question. When Donald Trump ordered the attack on Iran last week that took out the terrorist Soleimani, was he within his constitutional rights to do that?
This is a very interesting question. We've been using this language for a while, state-sponsored terrorism, and combines two things that we usually don't equate to each other. We talk about states as sovereign governments that have official relationships. When we do attack states, that's war. But terrorism, these are non-state actors who are not playing by the rules, who should be taken out to protect people. And we saw a very bold move by the president there. I'm not big on us being in Iraq in the first place. So this idea that we maybe damaged relations, I'm not too concerned about that. But it's very interesting. The language of state-sponsored terrorism has been used a long time, well before Trump. I'm sure this General Soleimani was up to a lot of shady things in his lifetime. this is also debatable whether or not this. It depends if you view him as a state actor or a terrorist, right? So this is up for interpretation, and the Trump team certainly has a case that he's involved in state-sponsored terrorism.
Well, that sounds pretty damn murky to me, kind of like what's going on with the this whole impeachment thing. But you know what? It's a little less murky and a little more clear just because you've spent some time with us. Doctor, it's always great having you on. I really appreciate your time and your thought. You make things understandable, and I think for a lot of us, a lot of this stuff is like some sort of foreign language that we have to learn inside of 2 or 3 days. Thank you again for your time. We appreciate it.
I love being on your show, Ken. Anytime.
There you go, Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, Tarleton State, Congress back in session. Pelosi still has the articles of impeachment on her desk. Nancy, it ain't that far to walk. But if she gets outflanked in the primary by someone even more liberal than her, this could go on and on and on.